Since the majority of people watching are probably either here from my videos on TikTok or Instagram, I will make this introduction short since you already know what this project is. If you are new to my channel, hi, my name is Katrin, also known as THISISKACHI, and I like to sew princess dresses or dresses in general. Make sure to check my previous videos on TikTok, Instagram, and of course here on YouTube. Go follow me on all my socials and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to be notified once I post again. Now that that's out of the way, let's get to sewing. For this project, I bought this fairly cheap dress off of ASOS to upcycle it and make something totally different out of it. I had this fairy tale, kind of foresty, fae-like dress in mind, and I just started working on it. Without any sorts of execution plan or idea how I actually wanted to pursue this project, I started pinning down the bodice of the dress to a simple cotton canvas I used to draft new patterns and sample them. You just actually saw me detaching the skirt from the bodice, and that is because I mainly focus on the bodice and will leave the skirt mostly as is for now. I machine stitched the two fabrics together and slowly began my way working up and down the bodice to fuse the two fabrics together. And by fuse, I really mean fuse. Now you see, in corsetry it is very important to work on one fused fabric rather than layers of fabric, like in conventional clothing, for example. And I just decided to work with what I already have. I started stitching down the tulle on both sides of the seams of the original garment to be able to cut open the seams without too much destruction. I then proceeded to further stitch down the tulle to really give the pieces the strength they needed for an actual corset. I ended up stitching down rows 5 mm apart of every pattern piece. This may now look like a complete mess, and believe me, it is, but I promise I end up making something fairly decent looking out of it, so don't worry. Looking back on this now, as I am recording the voiceover for the project, I probably would have spent less time on the structure of the bodice by just taking my corset pattern, which you can see here, and drafting a new bodice out of a new cotton canvas, but I believe upcycling really is what this project is best described as, with the path that I ended up choosing by using the original tulle. I tried my best fitting my pattern onto the pieces I had, but had to improvise a couple of times to fill some areas that needed more fabric. I did that with a few layers of cotton canvas to mimic the strength the tulle gained through pressing and stitching down layers upon layers of itself. I then was able to cut out the actual pattern pieces and fix the fabric fill-ins. I did so by stitching down the canvas like I did with the tulle. Since I was afraid of a whole bunch of fraying, I stitched down some cotton tape around all the pattern pieces. This is not as much a necessary as it is a preventative measure on the path I chose to go by this, but it certainly helped me further in the project. And you can also see how the fill-ins look like in the final structural pieces. Since I decided fairly early on to hand sew a bunch of this, because frankly I just enjoy watching some movie, documentary, or just YouTube while hand sewing, I cut out the pattern pieces without any seam allowance. This was also due to the fact that, out of experience, I always end up having to take in the corset by just a little bit anyways, which backs up the decision of hand sewing the pieces edge to edge. I continued hand sewing the closure into the side seam. I used this Hooks and Eyes cotton tape for this, which I cut down to the desired length and proceeded stitching onto the corset. I have to say there is something rather pleasurable in hand stitching the closure, or in particular this hooks and eyes tape. In a previous project I machine stitched it and it not only broke a bunch of needles because I accidentally slipped and had my needle crash into the metal of the tape, but it was also nerve-wracking to guide the machine over the heavy corset while sewing a straight visible line. I don't know, I think the hand sewing is less stressful and you end up having more control over it than with the machine, in my opinion. This is what the pieces look like stitched together, and you can see it's a bit too wide. I fixed that with some darts in the side back and front panels and decided to put some boning into the corset to give it more structure. This decision derived from the fact that when I moved, certain areas started folding which I didn't want to fold. Therefore, boning was the only measure to prevent this from happening. I use a stitchable boning for this, by the way, which I highly recommend. It just stitches on directly onto the corset and there is no need for boning channels. It's been a lifesaver. With the structural part all done, I pinned some silver fabric to the bodice to line the whole piece. Using a stretchable fabric for this will help immensely, since it cancels out having to put darts in the outer layer of the fabric and just stretches over the wider portions of the corset like the bust and hips. I pinned down the fabric as much as possible, the width of the corset, and the boning gave me some hard time to put needles into it at all, and took it off the dress form to hand sew the fabric to the corset. I did so by turning the fabric over and under and pinning it down. Then again, it was time for a good cup of coffee and some good documentary while hand sewing the silver fabric to the whole piece. After I spent about a day sewing, I was able to put the actual fabric on the dress. I started measuring the length of the upper edge, but quickly realized that I still hadn't attached the skirt back on to the bodice. I had to work with my leather machine here because the corset plus the gather tool of the skirt simply was more than my normal machine can handle. It all ended up working fine, and I was able to continue with the actual layer of fabric I had in mind for this dress. Now, the reason why I measured the upper edge in the first place was to get an idea on how much fabric I would need to fill the whole bodice. I did a mock-up of one fabric color, which I pleated and found very likable and pleasing to the eye. But then I decided to ask you guys on Instagram which color you liked best. The pink, the orange, or both. And most of you said they liked both, which was also my favorite. But that meant I had to know how much fabric I need of the two colors to pleat and cover the whole dress in order to cut it beforehand, stitch the seams of the two colors of tulle, and pleat and pin the fabric finally onto the bodice. After some quick math, I had it figured out and was good to go. I returned to my leather machine and stitched down the upper pleats as well as the I wanted some really fluffy off-the-shoulder sleeves for this dress. Therefore, I took some stockings which I had laying around in my closet since third year fashion college, which I had used for a photo shoot of my collection back then, but since never pulled out again. They came in handy now as a makeshift arm for my dress form. I simply stuffed the stocking with some cotton to the desired width and length. Just take some measurements of your own arm and adjust your stocking arm. I settled with 60 centimeters, which is what a normal sleeve length would be in conventional fashion. Simply knot the ends. You could stop here and use the stocking arm as is, but since I planned on reusing the arm over and over again, I decided to give it a bit more strength. I used some cotton tape to form some vertical and horizontal lines, which help fix the position into the shape I made and help prevent the arm slowly giving in to gravity's pulling down force, hence making the measuring beforehand somewhat useless. I stitched the vertical lines down onto the stocking while making sure to catch the horizontal lines likewise to minimize time spent on the stocking arm, since we're all here for the sleeves and not the stocking arm. Instead of making puffy sleeves which would be cuffed at the wrists, I decided to just leave the fabric as is. They now measure from shoulder to floor and create, together with the skirt, a beautiful fairy-like train which I just absolutely adore. So thank you so much to all of you out there supporting this journey along the way. All your love and feedback I received from my mini-series on this dress on TikTok, and overall for watching this video. Make sure to leave a comment with your opinion on the dress and this video in general, and give it a like if you so desire. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.